Yo everybody, what's going on? This is Keegan from Kman Reviews. If you enjoyed this review, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. And if you have any opinions at all that you would like to share, make sure to leave them down in the comment section. Attack Attack. Someday Came Suddenly. Attack Attack are an American metalcore, scenecore band, one that I wasn't completely aware of as that whole scene movement kind of went right by me. Doing my research for this album and band, I went through a roller coaster ride of emotions and expectations. I first discovered that the lead singer of this band at the time of this album was Austin Carlisle, who was the vocalist for Of Mice and Men, a band that I found a lot of enjoyment in. Then I found out that this album was critically panned, it has a bunch of Christian themes in it, there were some unique genre fusions, so I was very up and down with my hopes for this album, but now, here it is in front of me, the band's debut album, Someday Came Suddenly, released in 2008. And let's just jump right in. What are my thoughts on this album? Let's find out as I review it, track by track. We will start with the singles, with there only being one of them, with that being Stick Stickly, which comes through bursting out of the gate right away with a shriek, really letting you know what you've just gotten yourself into. And frankly, this is quite a journey of a song. There's so many tempo changes, stylistic jumps. It opens up with that tough staccato riff, transforming 30 seconds into a typical pop-punk jam, then back into that riffing. There's an incredibly brief keyboard solo, then a blasted synth rock section, a breakdown, then it suddenly jumps into an electronic trancecore thing, then one final breakdown at the end. If that sounds a lot, trust me, it's a lot. It's like some kid who's hyped up on sugar and sweets from Halloween and he's bouncing all over the walls and all around the house. Sure, while this track does show the group's ability to be very versatile, and they do so well, instrumentally and vocally, the track is solid. I mean, aside from that trancecore section, there was some terrible autotune that ruined that. But as a result of that versatility, the track comes off so loose and inconsistent. It doesn't know what it wants to be. Apparently, this track also spawned in the crabcore meme, where the guitarist of the bands would squat down into crab-like stances. I just find that hilarious, but that's besides the point. The song isn't terrible. I feel like if it stick to one genre, this would have been completely acceptable, but the combination of everything together is just way too much. Now for the rest of the tracks. Opener Hot Girls and High Tops, a 42-second intro opening up in a completely crunk fashion. That's really the whole track is a crunk introduction. It's got the buzzing, ringing synths and the chanted what vocals in the background. It sounds like something Lil Jon could have been on. I will say though, this transition from this intro into Stick Stickly is pretty solid, but that's really the only noteworthy thing this song does. Bro Ashley's Here actually takes a little bit of time to get started, playing off another transition from Stick Stickly, with a muted opening 20 seconds before Austin's scream bashes through. I will say Johnny Frank's vocals on the pre-chorus are actually really enjoyable. I like his clean performance, and it's a stark contrast to Austin's vocals. Structurally, the song feels much more compact and visualized than Stick Stickly. It's not constantly jumping all over the place every 30 seconds, only really changing depending on the active vocalist, but the changes are incredibly noticeable, and at times, it almost feels like it comes off from two entirely different bands, and thankfully there's no cringy electronic section, so that's bonus points for me already. Lyrically, it does tackle some of those Christian themes I mentioned earlier, including sinning, a desire to be faithful, name-dropping the Holy Ghost directly. Honestly, a pretty solid song. I will probably keep this one around. Shred, White and Blue is also not really that bad of a song. I was quite impressed on the opening moments. That first verse is really invigorating, with Austin sounding like he's gonna shriek his own lungs through his throat. It's that damn aggressive. Plus, how the staccato riffing on the pre-chorus matches the vocal melody to an extent is headbang worthy. Not too huge on the autotune on Johnny's chorus, however. I don't think it was that necessary, but the fluidity between Johnny's pop rock section and Austin's screamo section was extremely clean. However, speaking of unnecessary, what in the world is that whirlpool of synths for the bridge? That just felt tacked on for no discernible reason and kind of kills the energy and momentum the song had already built up. Lyrically, I kind of expected it to be this political conservative song, but instead I got these messages that this is actually trying to convert people into this religion. There's a lot of lines that seem judgmental in others' life's choices and how their life choices are better through some arbitrary criteria. Not too big on that message, I just don't really like people shoving their beliefs onto me, but the song wasn't bad. Party Foul might have sounded like a nice idea in theory, but the way this one was executed sounds kinda ugly. Instead of having separate sections for the techno and metal, this time they just thought, fuck it, let's just combine them and see how it goes, and in my opinion, it didn't go well here. The pairing of rough staccato riffs and bubblegummy vibrating synths, it's not a match made in heaven, and since that's what initiates the track, it's a pretty big buzzkill early on. Not to mention that it continues to nearly the end of the song. The standard metalcore areas are kind of like mini havens on the track as a result, being assisted by Austin's consistently good screaming. Lyrically, the song seemingly diverts away from Christian topics, instead with this one being very vengeful towards this unnamed figure. I probably would have preferred this song more if it was just another Stickly, but the shot didn't really hit the mark here. What happens if I can't check my MySpace when I get there, which is an extremely cheesy and extremely dated song title. However, I really enjoy how this one opens up. That lone drum melody evolving into a clean yet satisfying rock instrumental, it reminds me of something from like earlier Asking Alexandria with that right amount of heaviness. Then it transforms yet again into this multi-layered vocals and suffocating synths. It dives back down to the verse, which is really well done. I enjoy Austin's screaming and the cry of that guitar, but then we get more auto-tuned vocals and they just become way too much. It's not even an appealing attempt. It's almost like a parody. The second half is mostly just a repeat of the first structurally, same overpowering synths, same auto-tuned vocals. It just didn't work for me. There are flickers here that I enjoy, but the bad kinda outweigh the good on this one. I'll pass. Interlude is just that, an instrumental interlude, shedding all the metal elements and just being this electronic techno beat that's not bad by any means. It's easily one of the most consistent musical passages on the record, but I'm still not going to keep it around. The People's Elbow opens up with this cacophony of synths, which unlocks the gate into a very smooth transition into the band's metal style. And I gotta say, out of all the tracks so far, this one has the most likable amalgamation of the techno synths and the heavy metal. Aside from the opening, the synths don't really stick out all that much here, mainly being used as backup to provide an extra melodic layer under the tamer, catchier choruses. Not to mention how the screams are also some of the most guttural on the record, with the instrumental amplifying as a result. It's quite a well done song, and while I'm still not a fan of Johnny's auto-tune singing, the intensity of the auto-tune is limited here, making it on the more enjoyable end of the spectrum as a result. And that's kind of where this song sits for me, one of the best here. Kickin' Wing Animal Doctor is the only song here that doesn't have any electronic elements at all. It's strictly that metalcore sound, which theoretically could have been a great highlight, and yet it isn't, and I think that's partially due to the inconsistent vocals and lyrics. When Austin is doing his thing and screaming over the energetic beat on that breakdown, it's nice, but I can't say I'm big on the semi-spoken word sections about finding this religious refuge in life, not just because of the lyrics obviously, but also just the way it sounds is very clunky. Speaking of lyrics, it is all over the place here. As previously mentioned, this does have strong Christian themes, but there's also moments about bashing someone for not seeing the way he does, and also getting ready to perform on stage, and a sudden fear of being forgotten. The song jumps around to these different concepts several times, and unfortunately, this one just didn't click for me. Dr. Shavargo Part 3 is a track very similar to The People's Elbow in that I believe it's one of the shining moments on the record. A very similar thing happens here where the synths aren't really the prime focus, being used to back up the metal aspects, which is quite enjoyable. This one does suffer a little bit more in my opinion for a few reasons. One, the auto-tune is a bit more ham-fisted, not the most satisfying use of it, and it gets a little bit annoying. Two, there's a minor electronic dance break near the end, which does feel very forced, but to give the song some credit, it's probably the best executed of those techno sections on the entire album, due to a nice transition. And lyrically, it's a little bit jumbled as well, with extremely violent portrayals of faith and love, but then when that techno break comes in, it switches to, "Oh yeah girl, come on, make your move," which only makes me wonder where the hell that even came from. Regardless, I do think it's one of the better attempts at this genre fusion on the album. Not a bad song. Catfish Soup presents arguably the strongest religious theme out of any track on this album, calling for an escape in God, saved by His grace, and just how none of it is done by chance. Doesn't really work for me there at all. As I've stated in other videos, I'm not religious, so hearing this doesn't do much for me. Aside from that though, the song is fine. It tries to be another People's Elbow or Dr. Shavargo, with the synths playing more of a backing role, but the synths this time are pushed much more forward in the mix like they're desperate for the spotlight, and with both sides clashing here, the whole section comes off as smothering in its instrumentation. The breakdown about halfway through is extremely heavy though, probably one of the most grimy on the record, and I really like that. The song has pieces here that I enjoy and pieces I don't, and that's kind of where I stand. I could take this one or leave it. And finally, the closer, aptly titled Outro, is a brief 1 minute and 24-second instrumental to close off the record, and it's completely different from anything else here, with it being purely piano, no percussion, no dance themes, nothing. Just a sweet, light piano melody, which is fitting to close off an album, but definitely not what I was expecting here. Overall, this was a journey of an album to say the least. I can't say I came out of it with a positive experience, but at the same time, I don't think this album is worthy of all the critical bashing it's been getting. It's not a terrible record, there are glimmers of greatness here. Austin's screams, for example, are definitely worth praising. The band certainly knows how to play as well, but this album definitely has its fair share of flaws. The often forced electronic moments feel very out of place and off-putting. The contrived lyrical content didn't resonate with me. The album as a whole is a very one-note experience. Some of the songs meld together in a way where it's hard to find any distinctive moment, and I swear most of the songs on this album are in the exact same key, which only solidifies that lack of originality. I can admire this album though for being so brazened in its genre versatility, although a lot of the time that variation does miss the mark in execution. I think I'm feeling about a 4 out of 10 on this album. Well guys, hope you enjoyed that review. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.